You are listening to the Smart Betting Club podcast with me, your host, Peter Ling. Now, this podcast is sponsored by the Matchbook Betting Exchange, and you can find out more on what they offer smart bettors over at matchbook.com. And if you are interested in learning more what it takes to make a profit betting, please do check out my service for winning bettors over at smartbettingclub.com. Hello and welcome to the Smart Betting Club podcast. This is episode 87. And joining me today is a man who, for the past 17 years or so, has been eking out a living from betting and also running a series of very successful racing-based services. So it's a big, warm welcome to Kieran Ward. Kieran, it's great to have you on the podcast finally.
Yeah, it's been a while, isn't it? But thanks very much for having me. I've been very nervous about it, but also looking forward to it.
Well, I'm really looking forward to it myself. Anyway, as I explained at the start there, you've been betting seriously since 2008, as I understand it, full-time in the great game of betting.
Yeah.
So what's that, 17 years?
Probably a little bit longer than that as well, maybe a couple of years. That was very close to my entire income coming from betting before that, yeah.
Great. Well, that's a long, long time to be in the industry. No doubt a lot has changed over that time as well. But we'll get into all of these topics as we go through the podcast. But for those not familiar with you and what you do, can you give the listeners a bit of a quick intro to who you are and what you currently do?
Yeah, my name's Kieran Ward. I bet for at least some of my living nowadays, but probably the majority of my income comes from running tipping services and creating value finding software for others to use.
Yeah. So the Value Machine is one of your most prominent products, and you've got a new review service that we explored in SBC 150 in March 2025, which takes that and brings it to the exchange, and we'll get into that later. So that was one of my first questions. How would you frame yourself? A professional gambler making profits or the betting exchange, tipster betting expert? You know, when you're at a gathering or when people ask you what do you do, how would you best summarize it?
It's a tough one. I don't really think I'm any of those things nowadays, at least not exclusively. I tell people I'm involved in the betting industry, and that involves betting for some of my living, but also for helping others to make their betting pay.
Okay. If we go back to 2008, then let's get back into like that process of working in the betting industry. You talked then about that was predominantly your income. Talk me through what led up to that point. You know, were you working outside of betting and then decided to get involved again in it?
Yeah, I mean, I've been betting seriously again. I bet fairly seriously when I was very young, and then seriously again from around about 2000, making a profit pretty much every year from then on. And then getting very serious when discovering that the idea of top-down betting rather than bottom-up betting, so you could have far, far more bets and it take far less time.
Yeah,
I found very quickly at that point that I was actually working shifts, which left me free in the mornings to bet. And I was finding pretty quickly, once I'd sort of realised that Betfair was the key to finding value fast, that I was very quickly making a lot more money from betting than from going out and working shifts.
Okay, yeah. I think there's probably people listening to that who can relate to that or have had that quandary at different points. Was that betting on racing then? Because if we're going back to 2000s, that's probably the halcyon days of the optimal time to bet on racing, where restrictions took a while to take impact.
Yeah, although I wasn't doing this type of betting in 2000, I was mostly form-based. I used to get some information. I know quite a few people around Lambourne where we'd have 3 or 4 good touches a year on information. But once we got up to 2008, then I moved almost exclusively to betting top-down, market-based stuff.
And so then you were making substantially more from that betting than you were working shifts in a regular job, and you decided to take that leap. What was that like, that conversation or the thought process leading up to that?
It was a tough decision, but I lost my dad in about, 2005? And he left me, not a lot of money, but a chunk of money that made the decision a fair bit easier, that I've got a bank and I've got 6 to 12 months worth of expenses money put aside, so that certainly eased the decision.
Okay, so it gave you a tank, as some people would call it, to get to work
with.
Exactly. Okay, so you had that and you probably thought, now's the optimal time to go and do that. And so that was early on, your betting, like as you said, the top-down stuff. How's that changed since then? How did that evolve? Looking at my own betting, every year is different. The sports or markets I target, and I imagine it's been the same for you.
Probably until about 2 or 3 years ago, everything I did was based on identifying runners that were going to go off at a lower price than I could get now. Last 2 or 3 years, that Betfair price has become less accurate, just for whatever reason. The lack of liquidity, people betting elsewhere, for whatever reason, is not as accurate as it used to be. So I've brought in more of the bottom-up kind of stuff, particularly since working with Allan, who we'll talk about later. There's been much more of the fundamentals coming into my betting rather than just market-based.
Yeah, and that's, like I say, down to leaving Betfair and the lack, obviously all the affordability and maybe just Betfair's own lack of focus on their exchange.
Yeah, I think so. It was, for a long time there, it was an amazing tool for learning true probabilities. So.
I see. And then so these days, like I say, we'll talk about the work you're doing with Allan Darke, but these days you've had to adapt your betting, right? So you can't no longer utilize that as a marker and a way of identifying early value.
I do, and it still does work. It just doesn't work as well as it used to. And I think I use it far more now as an indicator that someone somewhere mid-morning, this is the wrong price.
And there's money for it.
And why might they be thinking that? And why might they be wrong? Or why might they be very right?
In terms of how you're betting currently, are you obviously using your own software and using some of these other markers? Like, talk me through where you're getting down and how often you're betting, etc.
I'm not betting as much as I used to, simply because I guess my exposure to the performance of my tipping is so great that I don't want too much risk in one area. If these tools don't make money for customers, then I don't make any money from customers. So I'm betting less, at least in amounts, but I still bet an awful lot each day. I'm having anywhere between 50 and 100 bets a day. It's very, very small bets though, 5s, 10s, 20s. And I've always liked betting like that. It did used to be quite substantially bigger, but I've always liked a large number of bets each day and spreading my risk across a large number of runners. Your variance is much less unpleasant that way.
It struck me actually when I was doing some research into this podcast, that's something you've talked about before. And it's contrary to how a lot of people like to think about betting. I don't know about you, when you talk about you do your work in betting, people say, what's the biggest bet you've ever had? Things like that. They have this idea like you're going around putting a monkey on something. But reality is, it's better to have lots of £10, £20 bets for that reason, isn't it? But it just creates more work. Yeah, doesn't it? It just creates more work to do that.
Yeah, it does create more work, but it's I find it a lot safer. That's for sure. Anything single event risk, anything can happen. So if I'm betting £10,000 a day, I want that across a lot of runners, not across one runner.
Preaching to the choir here. I definitely take that approach myself as well, if you have that time and opportunity. So explain to me then an average day. We'll get into your services. I'm just curious about your own betting to begin with here. What does that look like? Is it a really early start, or is it factoring around family and lifestyle? What's it look like for you?
My day revolves around morning drop-off and afternoon pick-up for the children. So I don't really get started on betting until just gone 9 o'clock. And then if I'm doing a pick-up as well, I have to factor in an hour missing during racing. Those are my priorities, at least at the moment, so until they're a bit older. Yeah, mornings I will be betting mostly with bookmaker accounts that I have available, or in shops, or speaking with some people who do put bets on for me occasionally. The afternoon now, the last couple of years, is mostly exchange betting in the live markets in that sort of last 5 to 10 minutes before the race goes off.
And no doubt the fact that the markets become liquid later in the day, like often, betting late, it does make sense that you don't need to be up at 6 a.m. or even the night before studying race cards, considering bets, just because it's very, very difficult to get money down at that point, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's good for, in the mornings, it's good for small bets with bookmakers where you're getting a bog price or you're getting a badly wrong price. And then afternoons, much better when the money comes on the exchanges, then you can have some decent sized bets there if things are moving in the way you expected them to.
I see. Yeah, but obviously the value is probably thinner at that point compared to early in the morning, especially if you're able to take concessions or you're betting in shops. So that, you thought there would be smaller stakes. Is that just a factor of that's what you can get on, whether it be on shops or online with the accounts you have available, and kind of goes under the radar a little bit more if you've got lots of £20 bets versus 200?
Yeah, I've got lots and lots of, again, it's work, but I've got lots of restricted accounts that will let me have £2-3 on the shorter priced ones. I will have my £2 or £3 with every
Really?
one of those accounts. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
And because I'm only looking to, if I get in full stake on these, I'm only thinking to have £20 to £30 on, so. I'll just get on as much as I can, and normally it will end up around somewhere between £10 and £30 on each one. Well, I wish I could balance it out so I got exactly the same amount on everything, but I think over time it balances out anyway.
Okay. In terms of like an overall stake, you could have thousands on any given day, and you're just taking the time to log into these accounts. And even if it's a small amount or medium-sized amount, you're getting on what you can because you just know that volume is the key.
Yeah, exactly. I just want to get my turnover as high as I possibly can. And that's far less than it used to be because, again, I don't want all of my risk to be on the same. I'm betting the same horses that I'm telling other people to bet. So I already have a lot of skin in the game if I don't have a single bet myself.
Yeah, you've been through that process. You've had that skin in the game where you're betting extensively. You know it works, and now you're helping through the services is more the scalable way for you to get on. At certain points, you can't get more than £3 on, or even in a shop, maybe you're thinking you're going to get PTL'd if I have too much on here, or going to get banned. So you're trying to go under that threshold to at least keep some skin in the game and some income from betting.
Exactly.
And then obviously pivot to the exchanges, and we'll talk about that later. So that's really interesting how you actually do that, because even someone like yourself, you still got ability to get money down even when you've been in the game for such a long time. And is it just racing? I know you're a big fan of sports like MMA, but is it just mainly racing that you're betting upon?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, 90% plus of my betting is on horse racing. I enjoy MMA and boxing betting, but it's I only really know the elite stuff. I don't know. I wouldn't be able to find something to bet on in the week. So I'll have reasonable sized bets on big fights, big MMA fights. There's plenty of those, but nothing like the number of opportunities there are with horse racing.
Yeah, the best one in the world, you're going to get, I don't know how many fighters on a card on a Saturday for MMA versus how many races you might find, or runners and opportunities in horse racing. So yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so that's your own betting and how it's changed and evolved and what you do currently. You've alluded to a few times some of the services, and let's explore that because that's really what you're really well known for. And I think, would you say the Value Machine is the one that is the main focus for you these days?
Yeah, it is. It has been really the flagship since 2016, and then a massive rebuild in 2021 with bringing on Telegram alerts. So although it actually probably doesn't take up as much of my time as, say, the morning value service used to. Is by far and away the main one now.
Yeah, because you used to email across selections at like 10:30 in the morning, like traditional tipsters used to. They go, well, here's the selections at 10:30. But obviously these days you've adapted to Telegram. But tell the listeners, if you will, like what the Value Machine does and how it operates, and then we'll explore it a bit further.
Basically, it's using market signals, a variety of market signals that we've developed over the years, to identify runners that it thinks will go off shorter price than you can get at this time, and therefore you will, even with the move from exchanges being quite as accurate as they used to be, that's still a good guide to getting value.
And so that it automates that process, doesn't it? So it allows...
Yeah, so basically, you just set yourself up so you can receive the Telegram alerts. It's customizable insofar as you can choose to only bet in certain price ranges, or with certain bookmakers that you have available, or in certain time frames. I tend to have it with no restrictions at all. And just if it's not one I can bet, or it's not one I want to bet, then I just wait for the next one. But I know a lot of people like to not see ones that they might have bet go on and win when they haven't. So
yeah,
they like to filter them before they see them.
Okay, yeah. And so how hard was it to build that in the first place?
The hardest part was explaining to a developer exactly what I wanted it to do. That initial getting the idea across was quite hard. Once the developer understood that, it wasn't that difficult for him to do, I don't think. Keeping it maintained can be a struggle at times. So there's a lot of work done on that side. And creating new developments and adding in new criteria can be difficult at times. But we're constantly looking to improve it, particularly as the exchange markets have become less accurate.
But there must have been the initial setup, the rules, and like, because obviously you were doing this, sending it through as an email, but the rules and like how you'd evaluate what constitutes a bet or what doesn't, what's a marker of importance to you, maybe the amount of money that's traded, maybe the price movement. Was that quite difficult to set all that up in place, or is that already in your mind, already used, and it was just quite straightforward? It was mainly the getting the developer to apply that to a product.
Yeah, I mean, I had it pretty much all clear in my mind. I had very, very strong fixed rules for my own personal betting as to what I needed to see before something became a bet. Actually, getting the rules set up for automation was not difficult, but getting the whole idea of it across to a developer was probably the hardest part.
I can appreciate that. And so from that concept, obviously, it fires out alerts. And this is based on betting with bookmakers. We should be clear on the Value Machine is you do need what would term soft bookmakers to make the most of it. And so the type of person it appeals to is just, regular people who have those alerts. But from the perspective of the more volume you get down, do you find you get a lot of people who have a lot of spare time, or is it people using it in their lunch hour or before they go to work or shifts? What type of person does it appeal to?
It seems like most customers are retired people who are able to sit near their PC or take their phone with them to the bookmakers at a reasonable hour in the morning. I would say probably 75% are retired people, often people who've got good accounts, possibly people who've come from match betting, that kind of thing, and have got accounts from that, either not enjoying match betting anymore or want to make more with it, do more with those accounts.
That makes sense. And how do they find that account game? Because this obviously is, anything which is beating closing line value or where you have a clear edge or something that might be steaming is something that can attract the attention of traders. Mind you, these days they don't need much, but what's the feedback on that? I mean, is that an increasing problem for you?
It's always been a problem, and betting these kind of selections will sooner or later get your accounts restricted. But I think that's why I like the fact. I think the average number of bets that the Value Machine finds these days is around about 90.
Yeah.
And across the summer, that can be close to 200. So you really don't have to be putting on noticeable sums of money to get your turnover up there, So you quite easily be betting fivers and make substantial profits.
And do you have people who are doing that, just betting fivers in every single bet that comes in, or 50 bets a day?
Yeah, I believe there are. There's lots of people out there doing that.
Yeah, and that's part of the game, isn't it? Losing accounts. Probably I would say as well, the idea that could be, 190 bets a day means that you don't have however many members all placing the same bet. And it's a little easier to flag to a bookmaker if they've got 100 people placing the same bet at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. And also, if the Value Machine has got it right, that bet will be flagged again and again throughout the day at slightly lower price each time,
Yeah.
So certainly people won't all be betting that particular selection at the same time.
This podcast is sponsored by the Matchbook Betting Exchange. When it comes to betting exchanges, Matchbook has been my personal go-to for some time now. Using horse racing as an example, they've offered the best prices on the most runners this year, which can make a big difference to your bottom line. Plus, with an industry-leading score of 4.2 on Trustpilot, you're in safe hands. Download the Matchbook Betting Exchange app or go to matchbook.com today. And if you enter the code SBC150, that's SBC150 on sign up, you can get commission free for your first 150 days, which can give you even more value. If you need to place a larger or more bespoke bet, or are indeed a corporate or operator client, their brokerage service is excellent and available 365 days a year. For more details, email the team at brokerage@matchbook.com. Matchbook Betting Exchange is for bettors who know better. People listening, no doubt curious. I know it's bespoke, so everyone's slightly different, but do you have any benchmark figures where maybe I've put you on the spot here with this, but the kind of returns or bank growth figures that people are able to obtain across your reasonable selection of bookmakers?
I think if somebody had, say, half a dozen bookmakers, including Bet365, Bet365 is the main one. I would say probably 50% of the alerts will be for them. It averages, if you're getting bog, 8.5%. If you're having 50 bets a day at a tenner each, you're looking at making maybe £40 a day on average. Obviously, it's not going to happen every day. You could do that with a £3,000 bank, about 15 grand a year, I suppose. Yeah, a huge ROC and a very decent ROI.
Yeah, indeed. So 8%, but bog might what, like 5-6% without. So even if you don't have some concessions, you're still able to get it. But obviously, the more access to softer prices, like obviously Bet365 prices, maybe people can't get. But obviously, other bookmakers still have opportunities. And I know there's quite a lot of SBC members that are big fans of the Value Machine for the reasons you've outlined. In terms of the audience, obviously, you say you've got retired people and people that maybe have the time and opportunity to make the most of it. How do they not just retired people, how do the membership in general endure like losing runs and variance? Because you can get alerts for big priced horses at 40-1, can't you? But you could obviously tailor that to what you want. But
Yeah,
how do you find the approach from members in dealing with that variance?
I get the odd person panicking. It can be very volatile. But I have to say, touch wood, that most of the time, I don't really hear people worrying too much about it. They may be worrying, but they're not telling me about it,
Okay.
which is the same as them not worrying. But yeah, I mean, we're on a bit of a drawdown at the moment. I think across all bets, we might be down 150 points over the last 3 or 4 weeks. And I've had maybe 2 emails from people concerned about that. So a lot of the members have been members for a good while.
Yeah.
I think I explain it well enough that they understand that if they're going to be betting in all price ranges, it's going to be volatile at times.
Yeah, indeed. That you say there, a lot of people have been there for a long time because you do often close up membership, don't you? Is that protect the prices or just to reduce the amount of admin that you have to oversee?
It's a bit of both. I'm very available to subscribers, so yeah, I spend a lot of time emailing with users, helping them out when they first start out, and I prefer to do that. Whereas if I open up spaces 3 or 4 times a year, I know that the next 3 weeks I'm going to be flat out answering emails, and I prefer that to being open all year round and having spent an hour a day sending emails to new subscribers wanting a bit of help. So yeah, it's like pulling off the plaster. I've got to do a lot of customer service, so let's do it all in one go 3 or 4 times a year.
That makes a lot of sense, especially, you don't have much people coming and going from the service. We see quite a lot of some of the services out there, which are all about constantly needing to generate new customers, which obviously speaks to the fact their product isn't good or it's flawed in some way. Whereas a service like this, you obviously don't need to do that because those that join who have the, the time and the ability and the accounts to maximize it do obviously see the value.
Yeah, I also think that because I do a 14-day very cheap trial, if people get through that, they'll have a reasonable idea of what it's going to be like for them. If they go through that and they pay their first month subscription, they tend to stick around.
That's good. Yeah, so let's pivot then to the review in SBC 150, which is the Value Machine exchange profits. And as the name says, it's focused on making a profit in the Betfair pre-race market. Now, we mentioned the name Allan Darke, who's run another SBC recommended service called System Analyst for a long time. And Allan, like you, I think has evolved his betting over a long length of time. He has been a full-time bettor, also running services. So he now is focused on where his customers can get bets on, and you're looking at this. And so again, that is into that pre-race Betfair market where liquidity is strong. But before we explore that, tell me about how this team up with Allan came about.
Well, in fact, you introduced us, Pete. I don't know how long ago that was, maybe 3 years ago. And yeah, I think Allan had spotted the Value Machine and spotted what he thought were some potential opportunities with it, that as exchanges became less of an accurate guide, that something receiving some strong support in the morning, even if that didn't last, when allayed with his kind of methods of betting late and of spotting value in the exchange markets, I think he felt that there was great potential in that. And through working through and identifying angles within the back data, he very quickly found a potential angle, which we've tracked live since July 23 and have been running as a service since November last year. We had a fairly large beta test from September to November. Now SBC have done one of their very thorough reviews of it.
Yeah, you were kind enough to let us have the access. I think Rowan was one of in the pre-launch service, the beta test to evaluate how it works, and really enjoyed the service. How difficult or how challenging was it to bring 2 sets of data like that? Or was it quite straightforward where you saw some edges and you would then just put some rules in place or some practices in place to go, right, this is the service we could operate? Was that quite straightforward or was there a lot more work involved?
There was a fair amount of work because we both had a lot of ideas about what might work. And it was a case of watching them for a while, setting up some rules, watching them and finding the ones that worked really well. And they've all got a logical basis behind them. There wasn't any, we just at random decided, these have done well over a period of time. There had to be a reason.
I see. how important then was it to make it, because obviously you're doing soft bookmakers with the Value Machine. I think some people do use it for exchanges, but obviously it's a little bit more tricky. But with this, it's very clear that you only wanted to bet in Betfair, and that was the pre-race market, which is the 5 minutes before the off. How important was it to make it that based on that?
Yeah, it was very important. We wanted it to be exchanges only, although we do advise people that if they have a bulk bookmaker available with the advised price that we're sending out, then they should probably take that.
Yeah.
But it was always the aim that these be profitable when the greatest liquidity came onto the exchanges.
So there's a minimum price, and then the suggestion is if you can obtain that minimum price or greater, obviously a bulk bookmaker go take it, but on Betfair prior to the off, then that kind of evaluates it as it meets the threshold and people can take that. Probably good to explain to listeners, because we do actually explore it in the review, but why that rather versus Betfair SP, where you can just say, if meeting the minimum price, take Betfair SP.
Yeah, we could say that, and it is profitable on that basis. We did want to do that because it takes a relatively small amount of money to wreck Betfair SP, so far better to slip our money into the markets when the big money is there. We're looking to have a fixed number of members and to advise a fixed amount that people should be betting on each one to ensure that we're not even going to make a ripple in the amount of money available in that final 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's all in review. And it seems some very sensible ideas, to make sure that you don't, because like I say, Betfair SP, especially at bigger prices, is easy to cannibalize because the weight of money in the Betfair's algorithm suggests that, a bet that might have started at 30 Betfair SP could be 20 or 22 or something like that. And therefore, you wouldn't necessarily know that you had impacted price until you maybe do some analysis and say, hang on, this profitable product is now losing me money.
Exactly.
What type of customer then is it appealing to? Is it a different type to maybe the Value Machine? Because, anybody can get an exchange account, but that idea of betting 5 minutes prior to the race obviously can be a little bit more time consuming.
Yeah, I think it's suited for an experienced bettor, somebody who can look at the exchange markets in that period and have a rough idea what way the price is likely to go. Because a skilled trader will be able to massively exceed the kind of profit figures we're quoting.
Yeah.
Simply by getting the best of it most of the time. Even somebody who's very average at it should be able, over a period of time, to equal the average price in that 5 minutes.
You don't have to be trained by a bookmaker.
No, you don't. You don't have to be a professional trader, but it will help that you know what you're doing, and the more you know what you're doing, the more money you're going to make.
Everyone starts somewhere, so you could, in theory, and we've looked at this, use the service as prescribed in a simple fashion, and then eventually you'll probably learn and adapt and understand how the markets will move and get better prices and get better edges over time. And we also looked at, I don't know if you've used this software, but Betfair Bot Manager is some software that we've explored, and that allows you to automate this process. So, in theory, you can load up the selections and put in the criteria, and you don't have to actually be at your computer for every...
Yeah, for sure. I think that can definitely be done. My only slight caveat with a bot is that you're never going to get better than that price you ask for. You're limiting yourself insofar as if you sat there and saw that the price was drifting like a barge, you would do much better being there, watching the market yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Because you have that visuals on that. But it's there as a backup plan or one of those...
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think it would absolutely make money.
So when you're picking up the kids from school at 3:00 and you missed the 3:05 from Kempton, at least you can have that in place and go, oh, at least I got my bet on, even if I didn't get the optimal price.
I also have a thing that Nigel Dove of Level Software does, which bets automatically for me into those markets in the last 5 minutes. I don't use Betfair Bot Manager. I use that, and I only use it when I'm not around.
Yeah, so it's a good backup plan. Yeah, and there are different products out there. Obviously, there's plenty that tap into, whether it be Betfair's API, no doubt Matchbook's API, all the different exchanges where you're seeing liquidity on racing. And obviously you can place this in shops if you were available to 5 minutes before the off, but and even bookmakers if you have them, soft bookmaker accounts online if you have them as well. I was going to ask you as well about, because what I've seen with you is over the course of time, and again with Allan Darke, because he's been running services for a while and betting, is you've adapted to the market. And I see quite a lot of tipsters who are resistant to that. There's one I was considering yesterday. And his approach is, I've been doing this for 25 years. I price up the race the night before and I advise bets the night before racing, because that's what I've always done for 25 years. And those services become less and less relevant because you can't bet at that time of the day. And you've taken the approach where, you used to advise bets or bet in the morning, or you would take different points earlier in the day, and you've adapted your betting. And I think it's a credit to you that you've done that, because the easy point would be, I'm not going to change it because this works. And the hard part is doing what you're doing, is to say, this is my customer base, or me. I'm not able to bet, I bet, and they're experiencing this friction. Therefore, I need to adapt what I'm doing.
Yeah, of course. You have to go where the customer wants you to go. And all the feedback I'm getting is that it's better for them to bet as late as possible, simply because there's no liquidity in exchanges in the morning. People are losing their bookmaker accounts pretty easily these days. They're also unable to get large sums of money into their accounts. We're following where the customer wants us to go, but also where our own betting has led us.
I was going to ask you about that. You referenced there getting money into the accounts, because deposit limits, affordability limits are a real thing. And imagine if you're retired, you might not have a discernible income to prove to a bookmaker that you can afford to bet to the stakes you would like to. Are you seeing this as an increasing problem that people are having to try and navigate?
It's not been reported back to me, but I think it must be the case. Yeah, I'm constantly being asked to prove my income, particularly since this £150 a month cap thing. When you're betting a fairly volatile thing, even to small stakes, £150 a month is not going to keep you topped up.
No, because you referenced the losing run that it's quite normal to have these losing runs. The more you bet, the more extreme the runs you will suffer. And it doesn't seem like that is brought into consideration, that sensible punters, people who are using your products, who are doing so in a sensible fashion and in a practical fashion, are kind of penalised the same as people that might have an issue and do need that protection. Doesn't seem to be a lot of joined up thinking on that front.
Yeah, there's some crazy stuff going on, isn't there? Allan was telling me yesterday about a colleague of his who had a Betfair master account that was more than £1 million in the black against Betfair, and they ended up closing it because he wasn't prepared to reveal the financial details of the accounts he was betting for. It's just like, what's that about? What is that about?
Yeah.
He was adding a huge amount of liquidity to the markets, and now he's gone.
Yeah, that story doesn't surprise me, because we hear similar tales, and people that, for whatever reason, I can understand it from the bookmaker perspective as well, because we see some of the very, very large fines that are coming in these days. And so anything that could be a risk on that front, it's just not worth taking, is it?
No, absolutely not. They certainly have to do it correctly, or some smaller bookmakers can get put out of business by fines of that size,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, if anyone is interested in exploring the Value Machine, we've got some features on the SBC website, but also the Value Machine Exchange Profits, which is this new exchange-based service. We've done an extensive review. We've had priority access to the service through myself, through Rowan, who's used it, and we've put together this review. There is limited membership numbers, like you say, you are capping it, and rightly so. But I believe as we're recording, there's still spaces available, but how long that might be the case, I'm not sure. So Kieran, aside from that, is there anything else on the horizon, or is this using up enough of your time at the moment?
Yeah, it's keeping me pretty busy, but Allan and I are constantly looking at new angles. I guess we're hoping that we'll be able to launch several exchange profit services with limited groups of members for each one, that to ensure we're not affecting the market, but we are actually able to have a really decent number of subscribers.
Oh, that's exciting. I didn't know that. That's really interesting, because you could have different groups and different strategies which would work. And then if you don't want to impact the market too much with one particular angle, you can utilize the second and maximize that. Because like you say, how much do you see traded in the 5 minutes before just a normal race these days?
I think it's normally 200 to 250,000 on Betfair.
Yeah.
150 to 250, and 90% of that in that final 5 to 10 minutes.
Yeah, just watching that.
But that's just an ordinary midweek meeting, Obviously, yeah, I don't know what. I've noticed it today. Aintree had some decent figures early, but it's still way, way down on what you would have expected a few years ago,
Exactly. But still enough there to put the money in and to take some value out of the market for followers of that service. So people, if you're listening to this and you're interested, I'll slide all the relevant information into the show notes in terms of links to SBC 150 and the Value Machine. So Kieran, anything else you want to add? How can people as well get in touch with you if they have any questions?
Yeah, just you can email me on kieran@makeyourbetandpay.co.uk. I normally get back to people immediately. I have a website at makeyourbetandpay.co.uk, which explains a bit more about the services we run.
Well, I can vouch for it as well, because I know there's lots of SBC members that have used the Value Machine and now are starting to use the exchange profits. Like I say, we have members of our team who've been using them as well, and they can vouch for their success for those people who've got the time and inclination to utilize them. So, Kieran, thank you ever so much for coming on. It's great to have a deep dive into what you actually do, and I look forward to, it sounds like there's always lots of ideas whirring away in the background and potential angles for future success. So I wish you all the very best in that.
Thank you so much, Peter. I appreciate you having me on.
Thanks, Kieran.